What happens when a whole nation forgets its God? The answer came in scorching winds and empty skies. The sun burned mercilessly over Israel as once green fields split open like shattered clay and rivers turned into scars of dust. Farmers stood helpless over barren soil. Mothers tried to calm hungry children, and despair spread through every village. This was no accident of nature. It was judgment. Israel had turned its back on the Lord, trading the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob for Baal, the storm god who promised rain but delivered only silence. Under King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, the land filled with idols and altars, while false prophets multiplied, and the people forgot their covenant. Yet one man refused to bow. Elijah the Tishbite, rugged and fiery, clothed in rough garments and hardened by wilderness life, carried a message that would shake the throne of Israel. His very name declared it. "My God is Yahweh." He walked into Ahab's royal court without fear, and with a voice like thunder he declared, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." The whole fell silent as Ahab's face burned with rage. How dare this wild prophet insult the throne and challenge Baal, the so-called god of storms? Yet Elijah's words struck like arrows. From that day the heavens closed. Weeks turned to months, months into years, and not a drop of rain fell. The land withered. Baal remained silent. Jezebel's prophets were powerless, and Elijah, the man who spoke and the skies obeyed, vanished into hiding. His name was whispered in every dry field, every empty well, and every hungry child's cry. Israel waited for the day the prophet would return, because this was only the beginning of a battle that would not be fought with swords, but with fire.
Elijah.
When Elijah left the palace that day, he vanished like a shadow carried by the desert wind. The prophet who had shut the heavens with a single declaration disappeared from the eyes of men, yet God's hand guided his steps. The drought tightened its grip on the land, but the Lord had already prepared a place of safety for his servant. God spoke to Elijah, "Leave here, turn eastward and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there." Obedient and unafraid, Elijah traveled across rugged hills until he reached the secluded ravine. The brook still trickled with cool water, hidden from the eyes of Ahab's soldiers and Jezebel's spies. While the rest of Israel struggled against hunger and thirst, Elijah drank freely from the stream that God had preserved for him, and then came the miracle. Each morning and evening, black-winged ravens swept down through the canyon air, carrying bread and meat in their beaks. They dropped their food beside Elijah, who lifted his eyes in gratitude. The God who had closed the skies was also the God who sustained his prophet. In the silence of the wilderness, Elijah learned to trust not in armies or kings, but in the daily provision of the Lord. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months. The drought grew harsher, the famine spread deeper, and the land groaned with despair. From palace to peasant hut, people searched for water and cursed Elijah's name, believing him the cause of their misery. Ahab sent men to hunt him, scouring valleys and mountains, but they found nothing. God's hiding place was perfect. Yet even in this secret refuge, Elijah was not forgotten. Each time the ravens came, he remembered the covenant God had made with Israel and the fire he carried in his heart for the nation. He was hidden but not silenced, waiting but not forsaken. At last, as the drought stretched on and the brook's waters trickled thinner each day, Elijah watched the stream that had sustained him begin to vanish into the cracked earth. The water dried up completely, a reminder that even in God's care, the testing of faith continues. But this was not the end. It was the beginning of another miracle. For the God who had commanded the ravens was about to send his prophet to a most unlikely place, where a starving widow would witness the power of heaven. And so Elijah rose from the empty brook, ready to walk into the next chapter of his mission, guided by the unseen hand of the Almighty. The brook at Kerith was gone, its bed cracked and dry. But God's voice came again to Elijah. "Go at once to Zarephath in the region of Sidon and stay there. I have commanded a widow in that place to supply you with food." So Elijah rose and began the long journey north. The land bore scars of the famine, villages abandoned, fields scorched, wells empty. Every step through the wilderness was a reminder of the word he had spoken and the weight it carried. Yet God's command led him not to a wealthy household or a storehouse of grain, but to the humble dwelling of a widow, one of the most vulnerable in a time of famine. At the gates of Zarephath, Elijah saw her. Thin and weary, gathering sticks with trembling hands, a small boy clung to her robe, his eyes hollow with hunger. Elijah called out to her, "Bring me a little water in a jar so I may have a drink." The woman turned to fetch it. But before she could leave, Elijah added, "And bring me, please, a piece of bread." Her steps faltered. She looked back with a voice heavy from despair. "As surely as the Lord your God lives, I have no bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little olive oil in a jug. I'm gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah's eyes did not waver. With calm assurance he answered, "Do not be afraid. Go home and do as you have said. But first, make a small loaf of bread for me, and then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land." Faith wrestled with fear in the widow's heart, but at last she obeyed. She took the flour and oil, expecting the end, but when she poured, the jar was still full, the jug still heavy. Day after day, as she baked bread for the prophet, for herself and for her son, the flour never lessened, the oil never diminished. In her kitchen, the God of Israel revealed his power to a foreign woman, proving that his mercy crossed every border. But the trial was not over. One day her son fell ill, his breath fading until life left him cold in her arms. The widow cried out in anguish, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Elijah took the child to his own room, laid him upon his bed, and prayed with fierce passion, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." He stretched himself upon the child 3 times, pleading with heaven, and the Lord heard Elijah's cry. The boy's chest rose, breath returned. Life filled his body once more. Elijah carried him back to his mother and declared, "Look, your son is alive." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." In Zarephath, the God of Israel had shown his power over famine and death, and Elijah's mission grew larger than Israel itself. 3 long years passed since Elijah first spoke the word that shut the heavens. Rain had not fallen, crops had not grown, and Israel groaned beneath famine's weight. The once proud land of milk and honey was now a land of cracked soil and hungry cries. Cattle lay dead in the fields, streams had vanished, and even kings were desperate in the royal palace. Queen Jezebel fueled her fury against the prophets of the Lord, hunting them down and killing them wherever she could find them. Hundreds hid in caves, kept alive only by the secret courage of Obadiah, Ahab's palace administrator, who feared God more than Jezebel. Ahab himself grew bitter, consumed by anger and humiliation. He sent men across kingdoms to hunt Elijah, but the prophet remained hidden under God's hand. At last, the word of the Lord came to Elijah again. "Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." So Elijah set out, walking into danger without hesitation. On the road he met Obadiah, who bowed in fear and awe. "Is it really you, my lord Elijah?" The prophet answered, "It is I. Go tell your master, Elijah is here." Obadiah trembled. "What have I done wrong that you are handing me over to Ahab to be put to death? Don't you know he has searched every nation and kingdom for you?" Elijah reassured him with steady words. "As the Lord Almighty lives, I will surely present myself to Ahab today." News spread quickly, and soon Elijah stood before the king. The air was thick with tension as the gaunt monarch glared at the prophet. Ahab's voice thundered with accusation. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" But Elijah's eyes did not flinch. His reply cut sharper than a sword. "I have not made trouble for Israel. But you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals." Silence fell between them. The king's authority weighed against the prophet's conviction. Then Elijah declared the challenge that would decide the fate of a nation. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Let us see this day whom the people will follow. Ahab, cornered by famine and desperate for resolution, agreed. Messengers were sent, summoning the nation to the mountain where altars would be built, and the truth revealed. The people of Israel, weary from drought and divided in loyalty, prepared to witness a confrontation unlike any they had ever seen. A battle not of armies and swords, but of gods and fire. And as Elijah walked toward Mount Carmel, alone yet unshaken, heaven itself seemed to hold its breath. The day arrived when Israel's fate would be tested upon a mountain. From every village and town, people journeyed to Mount Carmel, driven by hunger, fear, and curiosity. They had heard of the challenge, the lone prophet of the Lord against hundreds of prophets of Baal and Asherah. The air was heavy with expectation, as if even the wind waited for the outcome. On one side stood King Ahab, clothed in royal splendor but hollow in authority. Around him gathered Jezebel's prophets, 450 for Baal and 400 for Asherah, their colorful robes bright under the burning sun. They were loud, confident, a river of voices proclaiming the power of their gods. On the other side stood Elijah, alone. No army at his back, no royal guard to protect him, no crowd to cheer his name, only a simple prophet in rough garments, his face weathered by wilderness winds, his spirit burning with the fire of heaven. When the people were assembled, Elijah stepped forward. His voice carried across the mountain like a trumpet blast. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The people said nothing. Their silence revealed their divided hearts. Torn between fear of Jezebel's idols and memories of the God of their fathers. Elijah raised his hand and declared the terms, "I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left. But Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God." The people stirred, whispers running through the crowd. At last they answered, "What you say is good." The challenge was set. Baal's prophets stepped forward, choosing their bull and preparing their altar. They arranged the wood, laid the sacrifice, and began to call upon the name of Baal. Their voices rose in chants, their arms lifted toward the sky. Hours passed as the prophets circled their altar, shouting, leaping, crying out. Yet the heavens remained silent. Elijah stood nearby, calm and watchful, his presence a quiet contrast to the frenzy of hundreds. Around them, the people of Israel watched, waiting to see if Baal's fire would fall. The stage was set, the altars ready, the crowd holding its breath. And so began the contest that would decide not just the fate of a nation, but the question of who truly ruled the skies of Israel. Morning sunlight burned upon Mount Carmel as the prophets of Baal crowded around their altar. Their voices rose in unison, hundreds crying out, "Baal, answer us!" Their chants echoed across the mountain, their arms stretched to the sky, their bodies swaying in ritual movements. The bull lay upon the wood untouched by flame, while dust swirled in the heat of the dry wind. From sunrise until noon they shouted, their voices hoarse, their throats raw. Some leaped about the altar in wild dances, desperate to stir their God to action. The people of Israel watched in silence, their faces filled with doubt and unease. Baal was the storm god. Where was his thunder? Where was his fire? As the hours passed and no answer came, Elijah stepped forward, his voice steady and sharp. "Shout louder! Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." Mocking laughter rippled through the crowd. The prophets of Baal grew frantic. They shouted louder, slashing themselves with swords and spears until blood flowed upon the ground. Their bodies trembled from exhaustion, their voices cracked with desperation, yet still the heavens remained silent. No voice answered, no fire fell. The people shifted uneasily. Murmurs spread among them. Could it be that Baal was powerless? Could it be that they had trusted in nothing but stone and silence? Hour after hour, the spectacle continued until the sun began to dip toward the west. The prophets staggered, weary, bloodied, their cries reduced to whispers. The altar of Baal stood cold, the sacrifice untouched. Then Elijah, calm and resolute, stepped forward. With a single gesture, he silenced the chaos. The mountain grew quiet, the crowd leaning in, waiting to see what this lone prophet would do. The frenzy of Baal's prophets had ended in failure. The stage now belonged to the God of Israel. The mountain grew silent as the last cries of Baal's prophets faded into the dry wind. Their altar stood cold, the bull untouched, their chants unanswered. Hours of shouting, leaping, and bleeding had produced nothing but shame. The people of Israel watched in uneasy silence, their eyes now turning to the lone prophet who had mocked them with fearless words. Elijah stepped forward, his face calm, his steps steady. He motioned to the people, "Come here to me." Slowly, the crowd gathered around. They saw before them the broken altar of the Lord that had long been neglected. Stones lay scattered, weeds grew where fire once burned. Elijah knelt and began to rebuild it, placing 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, the tribes that God had called his own. With careful hands, he restored the altar, reminding the people of who they truly were. When the stones were set, he dug a trench around it. He arranged the wood, placed the bull upon it, and then did something unexpected. "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood," he commanded. The people obeyed, drenching the sacrifice. Again he ordered, "Do it a second time." Water flowed, soaking the altar. Then again, "Do it a third time." Streams of water ran down and filled the trench until the sacrifice was completely drenched. The crowd stirred in wonder. In a land dying of drought, Elijah had wasted precious water to prove that no trick or hidden spark would ignite this altar. If fire came, it would be unmistakably from God. As the sun dipped lower, Elijah stepped before the altar. He lifted his hands and prayed, not with frenzy, not with shouts, but with a steady voice filled with reverence. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." The air grew heavy. The people held their breath, and then it happened. A roar split the heavens. Fire of the Lord fell from above, blazing with a fury unlike anything the mountain had ever seen. Flames consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, even the water in the trench. The altar blazed until nothing remained but scorched earth. The people fell face down on the ground, trembling in awe, crying out in unison, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" On Mount Carmel before the king, before the prophets of Baal, before the nation of Israel, the God of heaven had answered.
"Oh God, hear
The
me."
mountain still smoked where the fire of the Lord had fallen, the air heavy with the scent of scorched earth. The people of Israel lay prostrate, their voices echoing in unison. "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" The prophets of Baal, once bold in their chants, now stood silent and trembling, their robes torn and faces pale with terror. Elijah rose, his eyes blazing with holy fire. He turned to the crowd and shouted, "Seize the prophets of Baal! Let not one of them escape." At his command, the people surged forward. Fear had shifted into fury, and those who once wavered between gods now moved with sudden conviction. The prophets of Baal were surrounded, their numbers useless against the will of a nation awakened. One by one, they were dragged down the slopes of Mount Carmel, their cries drowned out by the roar of the people. Elijah led them to the Kishon Valley below, where judgment awaited. The same lips that had cried to Baal in vain now cried for mercy, but the hour of reckoning had come. These men who had misled Israel, who had defiled the land with idols, and who had raised their voices against the Lord, met their end by the sword. The valley that once carried streams of water now carried the blood of false prophets. It was a grim but necessary purge, a cleansing of a nation's soul. When the deed was done, Elijah stood tall, his rough cloak stirring in the evening breeze.
I don't know, but
He lifted his eyes to the people, his voice carrying authority and triumph. Now you know, the Lord is God." The crowd murmured with awe, shaken by what they had witnessed. Ahab too had seen the fire fall and the prophets fall. The king who had once accused Elijah of troubling Israel now stood silent, powerless in the shadow of a prophet who carried heaven's authority. Yet even in this moment of victory, Elijah's mission was not complete. The drought still held the land in its grip, and the skies remained empty. But the stage was set for the final act. As the sun sank beyond the horizon, painting the sky crimson, Elijah turned his face toward the sea. Rain was coming. The fire of the Lord had fallen, the prophets of Baal were defeated, and the people had confessed with one voice that the Lord is God. Yet the skies above Mount Carmel still held no clouds, no dew, no promise of relief. The famine remained unbroken, and the land still groaned with thirst. But Elijah knew the word of the Lord, and the word had promised rain. He turned to King Ahab, who stood silent and shaken after all he had witnessed, and said firmly, "Go, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain." The king departed toward his chariot and camp. But Elijah climbed back up to the summit of Carmel. There, away from the crowd, he bent down to the ground, placing his face between his knees in deep prayer. His voice was not heard by men, but heaven listened as he pleaded for mercy upon the land. Elijah called his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The servant obeyed, climbing higher and scanning the endless horizon. The waves rolled beneath an empty sky. He returned and said, "There is nothing."
Follow him.
Elijah did not move. "Go back," he said. Again and again the servant climbed and looked, and each time the horizon lay barren, blue, and cloudless. 6 times the answer was the same. Yet Elijah remained on his knees, unshaken, pressing heaven with persistence. At last, on the 7th time, the servant's eyes widened. He returned breathless and said, "A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." Elijah lifted his head, and his spirit surged with triumph. "Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." Even as he spoke, the sky began to darken. The small cloud grew and spread until the horizon filled with rolling black. Thunder rumbled across the sea, lightning flashed in the distance, and the wind shifted with sudden force. The heavens, locked for 3 years, finally broke. Rain poured down in torrents, drenching the parched land, rushing into dry riverbeds, filling cisterns, and soaking the earth that had long cried for mercy. Israel rejoiced as the drought ended with the roar of heaven's floodgates. But Elijah was not finished. As the storm raged, the hand of the Lord came upon him. Tucking his cloak into his belt, the prophet ran down the mountain with supernatural strength. Faster than horses, faster than chariots, he ran before Ahab's royal carriage all the way to Jezreel, a living sign that the God of Israel was not only Lord of fire, but also Lord of the storm. The rain had come. The drought was over, and the prophet who spoke to the skies now outran the king, carried by the power of the Almighty. The storm broke across Israel with thunder and torrents of rain. But in the palace of Jezreel, another storm gathered. When Queen Jezebel heard all that had happened on Mount Carmel, the fire from heaven, the defeat of Baal's prophets, the confession of the people, her fury ignited like a blazing fire. The queen who had sworn to exalt Baal would not be humiliated by a single prophet. She sent a messenger to Elijah with a vow dripping with venom. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." The prophet who had faced kings without fear, who had mocked hundreds of false prophets, who had prayed fire down from heaven, now felt the crushing weight of exhaustion and dread. After years of confrontation, miracles, and struggle, Elijah's spirit faltered. He fled into the wilderness, leaving Jezreel behind. He traveled a day's journey into the desert and sat down under a broom tree. The man who once stood fearless on Mount Carmel now whispered in despair, "I have had enough, Lord. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down beneath the tree and fell asleep. But God had not abandoned his servant. An angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." Elijah awoke to find a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water beside him. He ate and drank, then lay down again, weary beyond words. A second time the angel returned, urging him, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." Strengthened by that heavenly meal, Elijah rose and traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There he entered a cave and spent the night, broken and weary, questioning his purpose, and the word of the Lord came. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" The prophet poured out his heart. "I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too." The Lord answered not with wrath, but with revelation. He told Elijah to stand on the mountain in his presence. A powerful wind tore through the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. An earthquake shook the ground, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Fire blazed across the mountain, but the Lord was not in the fire. And then came a gentle whisper. Elijah pulled his cloak over his face, humbled and trembling. In that softest sound, he encountered the presence of God more profoundly than in fire or storm. The Lord spoke again, renewing Elijah's mission, reminding him that he was not alone, that 7,000 in Israel had not bowed to Baal. Strengthened and restored, Elijah rose to continue his calling, no longer broken, but renewed by the God who speaks in whispers as well as in fire.